The United States makes the UN work when it wants it to work. And that is exactly the way it should be, because the only question to the United States is what's in our national interest.
My name is John, and the International Criminal Court is back in session. It is August 8th, 2026, and we're going to once again look at the situation in Ukraine. So, let's start. First of all, we got some very interesting developments in the Zaporizhia direction, or should I say OREKHOV direction, that is, to be more specific. But before we get to that, I want to point out that for the last, year or two, the worst performing group offensive-wise in all of eastern Ukraine was Dnieper Group. They were complete garbage. Literally one of the most useless parts of the entire Russian army. Very useless. And I made a prediction, sometime this year, that, during the counteroffensive by the Ukrainians to retake all of Stepnogorsk, that Vostok would come in to bail them out. And to be quite surprised here, the other way around is happening. Dnieper Group is bailing out Vostok. I can't believe it myself. So what exactly happened? Well, let's see. First of all, we have this situation here outside of the town of Stepnogorsk, and as you can see here, Primorske is under firm armed forces of Ukraine control, though at this time, we can definitely say for a certainty that the Russian army is still in the town of Stepnogorsk itself. But outside of it, it's all bad news for the Ukrainians. Pavlovka is back under Russian control, and as far as I know, it appears that the Russians are also trying to retake the villages of Novoyakovlivka and Lukyanevsky. In addition, the Russians have also begun contesting for the village of Novoandriivka. And then finally, the breaking news. The Battle of OREKHOV has started. And oh my. So, to give some details about the situation in OREKHOV direction, let's also mention the advance by Vostok further north. So after the apparent capture of Lyubitsky, which I'm sort of skeptical of, OREKHOV's northern road, the main northern road that is, has been cut off. And this road would eventually go to the Dnipropetrovsk region, and also the city of Zaporizhia, or Zaporizhia as the Russians would call it. And as a consequence of the recent pushes, Vostok has now effectively put the armed forces of Ukraine within the town of OREKHOV in some sort of cauldron. And for a while, I assumed that if these advances were to be true, that is, that Vostok would be doing exactly what I would expect them to do, and that's to bail out a crappy Dnieper Group. But for some reason, though, this time around, Dnieper Group not only advanced, but they've actually broken through in the vicinity and within the town of OREKHOV. Now, not all of the gains are confirmed, but according to Anatoly Radov, our favorite alcoholic from Russia, the Russians apparently control now nearly 50% of OREKHOV, and are also about to capture the strategic village of Mala Takhmachka. A lot of jokes have been made about this particular village because it's just so well defended. I don't know how the armed forces of Ukraine were able to pull this one off, but in a way, it sort of became Zaporizhia region's own Mariinka, which is this suburb here west of Donetsk City, right here. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, ladies and gentlemen, but it appears that Mariinka is smaller than Mala-Tokmachka. Much smaller. And if the news from the pro-Russia side were to be true, that Mala-Tokmachka is under Russian control, I mean, OREKHOV is pretty much already cooked. Like, it's done. But there's also news that, again, as I said, that the Russians have already seized around half of OREKHOV. I don't know how accurate or authentic these claims are, and we'll definitely see if this is the case in the next couple of days or so, by the time we get to the next video. But what we can definitely assume is that the armed forces of Ukraine have once again shown that they cannot contain Russian advances all over the front. And in addition, they can also not start a counteroffensive in many areas. They can only do it in like 1, 2, or at most 3 directions at a time. While the Russians, on the other hand, can push in more areas whenever and whatever they want. Like, for instance, they can push towards OREKHOV, like from the north. They can push towards OREKHOV from the south. So that would be 2. They could push towards Mazova. That would be 3. They could push towards Dobropila. That would be 4. They could push towards Druskovka. From this direction, that would be 5. Druskovka here again, that would be 6. Sloviansk and the Kramatorsk, that would be 6. Or, no, 7 now. Mykolaievka, 8. And then, we also have Kupiansk here, that would be 9. Northeastern Kharkiv, 10. 11. And then Kharkiv city itself, 12. Sumy city, like outskirts, 13. And also 14 here in this direction. So, Russia literally can advance in more areas than the Ukrainians can. The math supports this, like, theory that I came up with. The Russians simply have far more manpower than the armed forces of Ukraine, and there's not much they can really do about it. They can only start something in 1 or 2 directions, but everything else just crumbles. The worst part, though, as I mentioned in my previous videos, is that by choosing to commit themselves to a counteroffensive operation, the Ukrainians risk losing a lot of resources that would be used for defensive efforts, and as a consequence, they would end up, I guess, losing more territory. Like, yeah, they're retaking parts of Dnipropetrovsk and southwestern Donetsk, but what then? Did they really capture anything strategic? Yeah, I thought so. So yeah, while they're getting themselves killed in the direction of Komar and Gulay-Pule, the Russians are so far advancing and capturing a strategic town, which is OREKHOV. If OREKHOV falls, then the Ukrainian defenses here in the south are completely compromised. There will be no major urban areas for them to defend until you basically get to the city of Zaporizhia. So Zaporizhia region is doomed if OREKHOV falls. Now, I got a little ahead of myself because we don't have 100% confirmation if the advances in OREKHOV are true or false. But let's just assume that it is. If you in Zaporizhia region is cooked, that's all I can really say. They are doomed. And that these counteroffensives here were a complete waste of time, energy, and lives. I almost believe that Zelensky just wants to retake these areas of Dnipropetrovsk because the Vostok group humiliated his ass last year. Because he showed them that the Russians are still winning the war, even though he tries to contradict them every time. But then the Russians enter a new province in eastern Ukraine. So it effectively debunks like his lies that the Ukrainians are winning. In reality, they're not. Maybe they can achieve a frozen line, but a victory? They're far away from that. Further than ever before. Now, moving forward to the, or should I say moving north to the Dobropila direction, the Russians have continued their advances in the area of Dobropila city itself. According to Zoka's channel on Telegram, Huliv is in a gray zone, if not under complete Russian control. So the push towards this part of the Dnipropetrovsk border is ongoing. And then Anatoly Radov painted these parts, like these outskirts of Dobropila, under Russian control. So now we have confirmation that the Russians are in Dobropila itself, and clashes are ongoing. I certainly believe that all these are in a gray zone, and that the Russians haven't consolidated their gains yet. But also at the same time, I wouldn't rule out the possibility that the Russians control more than what we're seeing on this map right now. Because of, well, OPSEC. Like, they're keeping their mouths shut to prevent their positions from being overly exposed. So yeah, when the Ukrainians released that video of them claiming to repel a counteroffensive towards Dobropila, I was like, I'm not so sure about that one, Jan. And what do you know? Weeks or so later, the Russians are not only in Dobropila, but they have collapsed the entire southern flank of the city. It's kind of funny how much they lie like that. Though, to be fair, I don't know if it's as bad as Zapad or Vostochok. But anyway, moving on to the Juskovka direction. Not really a lot going on here, except for maybe a few gains in these empty fields, which were probably abandoned by the AFU a long time ago. The fate of Mykolaiv Pila is still uncertain, so I'm not going to really color anything at this time. There's also reports that the Russians have captured half of southern Oleksivo Juskovka, but none of this is confirmed, and I will not paint anything at this time until we hear otherwise. Though I certainly believe Ukrainians are in trouble here, though, regardless. The pocket southwest of Chazov Yar is still being closed up, so give that a little more time. But I do believe by the end of August it will be done, and then they'll just push on to, I guess, both Juskovka and Kramatorsk. Now, Sloviansk, I don't know yet. But we can definitely say for sure that the battle for Kramatorsk is coming a lot sooner than we think. I mean, battle for Juskovka is already de facto underway. Russians have not only the terrain advantage, but they're also, I mean, all things considered, advancing pretty fast. Though I don't personally believe they're going to make it to Juskovka until around maybe October to November of 2026. So the final phase of this year, around midterms. And speaking of Sloviansk and the Kramatorsk, there are little to no changes in these areas, though we can definitely assume, based on the recent satellite imageries, you know, like of all the shellings and all that crap, that the village of OREKHOV is in a gray zone. And if this village were to fall, then Sloviansk's southern flanks are basically busted wide open. And then the only thing left effectively defending the city is Mykolaiv, which Radov has also confirmed clashes are ongoing in. So yeah, not a lot of changes though for the most part. And then going to Leman, it appears the armed forces of Ukraine have regained a lot of ground here. And there's also a report that they're effectively clearing out all these areas. So the Ukrainian counteroffensive here was a success. And the AFU in both Leman and Svyatogorsk are going to be safe for just a little longer. But I don't know how much longer that is, they're going to keep celebrating because they are not doing so well right now in the Borova direction, which is kind of unbelievable to talk about considering that Zapad has struggled here for a very long time. But like all good things, they all come to an end. Not much going on in the Kupiansk direction, so we can definitely skip that. In the northeastern part of the Kharkiv direction, the Russians have continued their offensive to basically put the Ukrainians in this pocket here within the Kharkov province. They have captured the village of Ivanovka, and the last thing I heard, they're already clashing for Vasilovka, too. And to be quite honest with you guys, I wouldn't be too surprised if the AFU were to just say fuck it and evacuate this area here of the Kharkiv direction, because it's kind of useless now at this point. Without Billy Kolodiez, the defenses here essentially collapse. And then, therefore, Ukrainians are more likely to get encircled than to, anything good happening for them at that point. So, yeah, they're probably evacuating, as far as I know, at this moment. And there's also reports that Ani Shishine is also under Russian control, too, with clashes already taking place in Vodiane. I'm expecting in the next couple of weeks or so for Kuvatka to come under Russian control as well. And once that happens, the pocket is essentially closed. Like, that's it. That's the end. And then the Russians will then begin their greater push towards the strategic crossroads town of Veliki Burluk. Control over this means Kupiansk will be not only secured from further Ukrainian counterattacks, but it also gives the Russians the incentive to push towards the Sovietsky Donets River, like further to the west. And then going to the main Kharkiv direction, which is just north of the city, apparently they have advanced into both the villages of Kodivka and Hoptivka. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. Disaster for the Ukrainians. If they lose control over these areas here and unite with this part of the North Group's forces in Kharkiv direction, then we can probably expect a renewed push towards the suburbs of Kharkiv itself. The provincial capital, that is. Though, if you ask for my honest opinion on what they'll do about Kharkov city or Kharkiv, I don't really expect a actual battle for this city to happen. I think they're just going to try to cauldron it as best they can to the point where it's no longer going to be habitable for not just Ukrainian citizens, but also Ukrainian soldiers too. So yeah, I think Kharkiv city is on a clock, and at best, it probably has 2 years left before it completely crumbles. And then, oh yeah, one more thing. In Kosacha-Lopan, which is in the Kharkiv direction, most of it is now under Russian control, as you can see here, including the town center. And then going to the Sumy area, not a lot is going on, though we can definitely assume that DRGs are already infiltrating very deep into these forested areas. Which means that Sumy City, the provincial capital of, Sumy region, same name, is getting slaughtered. Or, strangled, choked to death, or something like that. It's becoming a pain in the ass to reside yourself in. So yeah, I don't think a lot of people are going to be in Sumy for much longer. And even if they were to remain, they're just going to put their lives at risk and perhaps face possible martyrdom. None of us would like that. I certainly wouldn't. It's one thing when soldiers die, but it's another thing when innocent civilians get caught up in the crossfire. And then lastly, the Glukov or Kharkiv direction. Not many changes here. though we can assume that Russians are aiming to clear this pocket out probably by the end of summer or so. And that's going to do it for today's video. So I hope all of you found it informative, enjoying maybe. And yeah, so I'll see you guys in the next 3 days from now. Hopefully we'll get a batch of more big news to come. Though I will say that this will probably be one of the last videos I'll do, at least this year when it comes to the 3 videos per week schedule, because some real life matters are coming in that will definitely affect my ability to make videos, but also I also don't want to be overly burned out on this. And yeah, so I'll see you guys in the next 3 days from now, and take good care of yourselves. Peace out, and bye-bye.